Why are we pretending? Why are we acting as if we don't have a society filled with weak, fragile minds right now? Why are we acting as if because the economy is tough, because life is challenging, that somehow we can ignore the mental and spiritual health crisis we're facing? You know, we have people, young and old, struggling deeply today. People taking pills just to numb the pain of depression, anxiety, and despair. And yet, as a society, we tiptoe around this reality. We pretend it's just an individual's problem rather than something we've been creating and feeding. They shout out about freedom of speech. We hear that all the time. But what does that mean today? It means anyone can push destructive ideas into the minds of the masses without accountability. That's what I think it means. What about you? Look at the music flooding the ears of our youth. Lyrics glorifying immorality, violence, and the breaking of every boundary that our Creator has set for us. They say, it's just music. It doesn't make people do bad things. Really? The same society that spends billions on advertising because they know what you see and hear shapes your behavior now wants us to believe music doesn't influence hearts and minds. And it's not just the music. Oh no. Look at the video games that drench the player in gore, violence, and killing. What is their argument for that? Well, see, they argue it doesn't affect behavior. This is pure denial. That's all that is. Science has shown us over and over that the human brain, especially the brain of a child or teenager, is not fully developed until the mid 20s, particularly the part responsible for decision making and impulse control. I mean, neuroscience consensus. This is a consensus from neuroscientists. They state the human brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for your judgment, impulse control, and risk assessment. They say it's not fully mature until around 25 years. And that's from the National Institute of Mental Health, NIM. The brain is not fully mature until the mid to late 20s. So this means young people are far more likely to be influenced by repeated exposure to habits, media, and ideas, both good and bad, because the filter for decision making is underdeveloped. Make sense? Yeah. Yes. Yes. What young people consume, what they watch, listen to, play has a deep, I mean trenched, black hole deep and lasting effect on how they think, feel, and act. You got the American Psychological Association and countless studies and confirmed that repeated exposure to violence it increases aggression and desensitizes us to real human suffering. And you can manipulate a child's values without even speaking to them just by controlling what images and sounds they absorb every single day. And the proof? Look at the statistics, right? Year after year, you got thousands of lives are lost in America to gun violence. And the age brackets that dominate both as victims and perpetrators. Mostly young men, not coincidentally, the ones most immersed in violent entertainment and a glorification of aggression in their social media feeds and pop culture. You have a census or you have an archive of data 2023 on gun violence. This was in 2023. Over 43,000 deaths from gun violence in the US in 2023 alone. And this has risen. The youth impact or the youth that are impacted by this gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children and teens in America ages 1 through 19. And the CDC reports The highest rates of homicide by firearm are among teens and young adults ages 15 to 34. You got the APA. This is the American Psychological Association, and their meta-analysis states that exposure to violent video games is linked to increases in aggressive behavior, aggressive thoughts, and angry feelings, and a decrease in empathy and helping behavior. And children who consume violent media regularly are desensitized to real life violence. Even if violent games and songs don't force someone to commit a crime, they create a mental environment where violence feels more acceptable or less serious. I remember even in the 80s when this was a big issue and people played it down and argued against that these things affect or manipulate the minds of our youth. And we see that today. Why people are still denying this when the evidence is here? Can you believe there are those out there that disagree with this information? They take even political positions and claim this is not true, even though the studies and facts show it to be true. We see it every year with shootings and violence and the reasons the individuals tout for such behavior. And then we have this slippery term, freedom of speech. Yeah, freedom is a blessing. That's true. But does freedom mean absolute chaos? Does it mean allowing poison into the minds of our people without any restraint? We already regulate things in life that harm us physically, do we not? Like toxic chemicals, unsafe food, dangerous drugs. Why not protect our spiritual and psychological health the same way? You know, in Islam, speech is not free if it causes harm. The Prophet, peace be upon him, has stated in an authentic hadith in Sahih Bukhari, he said, whoever believes in Allah on the last day, let him speak good or remain silent. And Allah states in the Quran in Surah Al-Isra, in the interpretation of his meaning, he said that, and do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge. Indeed, the hearing, the sight, and the heart, about all of those, one will be questioned. So, speech is a trust or an amana. What we say, what we spread, whether by our tongues, our pens, or our screens, we will be held accountable for it. And in Islam, there's a clear difference between nasiha, which is constructive advice, and ghiba, which is slander and incitement to evil. Hate speech, speech that stirs division, that rocks the boat, right, drives people toward aggression, spreads lies against entire groups of people. We see that. This is not freedom. This is corruption. Allah states, and He clearly commands in Surah Al-Araf, interpretation of His meaning, He said, do not spread corruption in the land after it has been set in order. That's not rocket science, is it? That should be very plain and understandable. Look, our society will not heal until we face the truth. Okay? We are feeding our young minds with destructive content and then acting shocked when destruction spills into our streets. Freedom must come with boundaries, and those boundaries must be rooted in morality and the protection of the human soul. Until we change what we normalize, until we stop making all of these crazy excuses for promoting poison in the name of freedom, our economy, our safety, our mental health, it will all continue to crumble. We need laws and accountability. That's what we do need. We need leadership that understands that hate speech and glorified immorality are not rights, they are weapons. And we, as Muslims, must be the first to stand against this, using the truth that our Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has given us to shield ourselves, our children, and our future. Because when the mind is corrupted, the heart follows. And when the heart is corrupted, the whole society falls. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your families. Because strong families make strong communities. And strong communities make powerful societies. If this was a beneficial video, spread it, share it to your friends, and subscribe to the channel, like the video, and come back for more. Thank you for coming. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum